Okay, so this is the affinity group for group 2 for Brian and Stacy. Brian's right there. We're focusing on vocabulary development and best practices there. So I'm going to start by talking about the research base. Essentially, why is vocabulary development important? Why is this an important thing for us to look at? And we all have studied the National Reading Panel now a few times in different courses. Vocabulary is one of the, quote, big five of the components that the NRP outlined as far as a key to successful reading. And many researchers have actually found a really strong link between vocabulary and comprehension throughout a lifetime. And you'll see here in our PowerPoint that we have some different researchers who have addressed this at different grades. And we will be sharing our PowerPoint so everyone can look up the citations and all of that later. Some more information on why. When decoding and vocabulary were both sufficiently developed, only 1% of students struggled with comprehension. So really focusing on that vocabulary and decoding can really support comprehension. Deficits in vocabulary knowledge may be the most widely shared problem among struggling readers. So those students who are having a difficult time, they are likely to have some needs in vocabulary. And also evidence exists that the phonological, orthographic, and semantic processing of words are interrelated such that vocabulary knowledge predicts rates of word reading. So it's all very intertwined, and vocabulary is a very key foundational piece here. Vocabulary knowledge is also really strongly related to reading proficiency and school achievement. So it's critical for oral and written vocabulary to increase as students get older, because that will enable them to comprehend increasingly more complex grade level text. So as the text gets more difficult, the vocabulary needs to get more difficult as well. And then first grade vocabulary predicted students' reading achievement in their junior year of high school. So those indicators are pretty important, and they do align with future successes. And high-performing third graders had vocabularies equal to the lowest performing 12th graders. So that's a pretty big gap for those 12th graders there. So again, just kind of outlining that vocabulary really does tie to school achievement as well. So differences in vocabulary knowledge remain once they are established, so they would need to be addressed. For any encounter with a given test, it's the quality of the reader's knowledge for the words in the text that is crucial to comprehension. And while without grammar, little can be conveyed, without vocabulary, nothing can be conveyed. So just a whole bunch of researchers helping make the case here that vocabulary is an important thing, and it's a good idea to make sure we're focusing on it. And so with vocabulary, there's kind of this focus on academic vocabulary as well. So this slide here is just kind of outlining what academic vocabulary is. It's exemplified by the ability to make fine communicative distinctions, affirm, confirm. You can form an argument, so you can pull evidence, make a conclusion. You can also construct abstract entities. So that's starting to get into that higher level of thinking, especially for secondary students. And you're also able to categorize in that way. So in middle school students, they are expected to read and understand expository texts with increasingly difficult vocabulary demands. So as you move up the grades, those expository texts have more and more intense vocabulary. And vocabulary knowledge is the single best indicator of students' reading ability, comprehension, and familiarity with academic discourse. So I mentioned earlier that one of the researchers shared that essentially if there is a gap in vocabulary, that probably will remain. So there might be a need for vocabulary intervention as well. So here researchers are sharing that evidence that effective vocabulary instruction can have a vital and enduring effect on students' ability to learn words. And there is evidence from a word generation program indicating that enhanced vocabulary levels result in increasing comprehension levels. So we just have a graph that kind of goes along with that there. You can look at that more in detail when we are sharing the PowerPoint here, but it's just looking at some vocabulary intervention and the successes that people have seen through delivering vocabulary interventions. So, summary of why we are studying this. Teaching vocabulary will not guarantee success in reading, just as learning to read words will not guarantee success in reading, but lacking either adequate word identification skills or adequate vocabulary will ensure failure. So it's kind of a gate to pass through rather than a be-all, end-all. And another researcher asserts that vocabulary knowledge is the single most important factor contributing to reading comprehension. So for this next section, I'm going to hand it over to Brian, and he's going to talk about the resource synthesis here.
Can you pause this for a minute?
Yeah, I should be able to.
So we've pretty much established the rationale for supporting vocabulary in adolescent years. So we're going to kind of go through a synthesis here of how we should actually support vocabulary development. And here's an instructional sequence for later grades, which I found from Bringing Words to Life by Isabel Beck, Margaret McCown, and Linda Kusan. One of the things I found is that the more study I did in this, the more the ideas seemed to coalesce around generally what they were speaking about. Some of the processes were named a little bit differently, or some of the terminology was a little bit different, but for the most part, the principles that were evidence-based and best in practice were generally these. So basically what you want to do is you want to introduce a few words every week. Beck and McCown talked about maybe 400 words per academic year, 10 per week, something on that order. And for an introductory lesson on day one, you just simply want to record the words in a log, post the words around the room, generally just get them familiar with that. And then you're going to move into days 2, 3, and 4, where you're going to have some daily vocabulary activities. We're going to vary your approaches. One of the things that they really stressed was robust activities, activities that are active so that the students get allowed a chance to use the words in many different instances, and the teacher gets to also model the words. And then day 5, you want to roll into some sort of an assessment based on how they're using those words. So here are the features of effective vocabulary instruction. And again, this term robustness was used by them, and it's an active involvement with the usages, meaning, and associations of the weekly words. You're using the words to create a context in which the words can be used. You're not just plucking them out of midair and expecting the students to learn them. You're creating a context for allowing them to justify why they're learning that. Encourage the usage of words in daily conversation. And then you're going to explore the differences in word meanings by differentiating between the various shades of meaning, establishing the connection between understanding and application. So features of effective word instruction, exploring the relationships. You're going to juxtapose chosen words. Why do we use one word instead of another? Explore the relationships to help cement word knowledge due to the connectedness. And this involves various aspects of the word. Create associations in order to recognize context also. So the results of frequent and robust instruction, Beck and McCown found that students responded better and faster to word meaning activities. They performed better on context interpretation tasks. They developed a sense of word ownership, which meant that they had a better handle both on definition and usage, and they felt accomplished when they were increasing their word knowledge. One example that I followed with one of the videos was where the students in a certain class viewed the inauguration of President Obama in 2016. And when asked about what they were able to get out of that, they were so excited because they had used he had used three of their words that they had learned that week during the vocabulary lesson. Also, students developed a sense of word awareness. They exhibited a knowledge of the target words and more generalized word knowledge. They began to notice and identify additional words to define as they became better owners of their own vocabularies. Key differences to note with vocabulary work with secondary students. You're dealing with a deeper exploration of the language. You're exploring how language gives meanings in general, exploring why words mean what they do, developing knowledge of the similarities and differences of words and their precise roles. Explore the complex dimensions and relationships. It's more rooted to text, increases the understanding of the text, illuminates how and why an author uses certain words. And as Stacy noted before, we're dealing primarily with academic language here, so we want to increase their depth of knowledge. It shouldn't be just a lesson in matching words with their synonyms. This is what a lot of classrooms do, And the reason for that is because it's easy and it helps in the preparation for standardized tests. But it doesn't allow for the type of depth and complexity and the relativity which is necessary for true enhancement. From vocabulary their way, this is Templeton and Baer, and their views are very similar along those lines. Basically what they're trying to talk about is here 3 different domains here: critical to address in depth, critical to address briefly, critical lens to student problem solving. This kind of correlates strongly with what Beck and Macau talked about with their 3 tiers of vocabulary instruction. They had tier 1, which were the basic words, which are the ones that you're learning in oral conversation. Examples would be warm, dog, run, talk, swim, look. These are the ones that students are exposed to very early, and they rarely need teaching. Tier 3, those are the ones that probably are critical to address briefly. Those are the more academic terms. Those are the ones where it's going to be relatively low frequency. The tier 2 words are the critical, which lends to student problem solving. Those are the ones where you probably want to spend most of your time on. These are the ones that are utilized across different domains or different spectrums. So it's very productive to spend time there because of the ability to relate these terms in different usages. Words such as contradict, circumstances, precede, auspicious are words we could use for examples there.
Great. So I'm going to talk about a quick final wrap up here, and then we'll move into some resources. So here's an outline of kind of 5 evidence-based best practices to consider with vocabulary instruction. So there's direct and explicit vocabulary instruction, multiple opportunities, varied opportunities, active and generative activities, and you also want to model the vocabulary use. So I'm going to break those down a little bit here. So recommendation 1, direct and explicit vocabulary instruction is strongly recommended by research. So Brian mentioned this, that researchers recommended an average of 400 words per year. That's one suggestion. But you want to make sure to examine the meanings of specific words used in academic language, including structure and usage. And you also need to be purposeful in that vocabulary selection. Recommendation 2, you want to offer multiple opportunities for students to use those new vocabulary words. So you think about the 4 domains of speaking, reading, writing, and listening, and I have some examples written there as far as how you could consider incorporating those words in different ways within the classroom. And then you also want to offer varied opportunities for students to use the word in different contexts, especially if it's that general academic vocabulary. So you've got provide various media to demonstrate use of the same word. So where else can you find that word in context? And then also comparing and contrasting how certain words are used in various contexts. Recommendation 4 is to utilize active and generative activities. So this is what Brian was talking about with some of that robust instruction. And those could be discussions, writings, graphic organizers, games, matching and associative activities. Sorry, I'm running kind of fast. We're running low on time. Recommendation 5 is you want to make sure to model the usage of the vocabulary in the classroom and provide that positive reinforcement when warranted. And that's not just modeling the one word itself, it's also including modeling that word consciousness along with the production and use. So as a teacher, are you modeling, hey, I don't know that word, and those processes? And you want to encourage students to follow your lead and also recognize when they do and engage students in that process. So Brian, we've got about 1 minute to buzz through those online resources.
So there are a wealth of resources out there. I just linked here to some of the videos that I watched. I found this Marzano 6-step process kind of interesting. It related to some of the research which we had done earlier. There are many resources, both audio and video, which you can find, which add a lot of great depth to this. These are some of the articles that I linked to. Also, I found, again, this word generation article at the beginning I found to be quite effective, and it was done, they did a lot of work in Boston with that, which tended to be pretty successful.
Okay. We just got more articles here. And then we have a list of some peer-reviewed articles if you want to do some further reading that is provided in the link as well.